Hello travelers. In this video, we're looking at the Black Knight satellite. Yeah, this thing, apparently, it's been like floating around the Earth for like 13,000 years, and it's piqued my interest. So let's check it out, right? It first came into existence, the Black Knight satellite conspiracy theory. Conspiracy, but apparently it's gone on, claims that the spacecraft of an extraterrestrial origin is in near polar orbit of the Earth. And NASA's covering up the existence of the origin. But let's delve into this thing. So this all started with our boy Nikola Tesla. You know this guy. Elon refuses to put Musk on his rockets, so you see Tesla. But this guy, he's considered a little bit of a mad scientist, but I love him. And he was building these towers, like these wire towers to receive transmissions. And this was like way back, it was like 1899, I believe was the... Oh, sorry, Earthworm. We lost Earthworm already. But he's building these towers, right? And he received these transmissions that didn't really make sense, because any transmission you send out on Earth, the repercussions of that transmission comes back to a certain degree, and for some reason he was receiving sounds that like were repercussing at a different rate than normal, so it didn't really make sense to him. And this was in 1899, and they considered Nikolai a bit of a nut. So they didn't really look too far down the road on it. But then this guy, just a few years later, maybe 1902 or 03 or some shit, Guglielmo Marconi. Guglielmo Marconi, I can't say his name, but I'm sure he's a fucking genius. He received the same transmission that Nikolai claimed to have received years later. And it just wasn't making sense, because even on Earth, supposedly if you send out these transmissions, there's a certain like delayed echo that could come back to your feed from what you're sending out, but these just were coming back in different patterns than what the standard was. So it piqued curiosity in these guys and me. They were basically receiving signals before we had satellites in space, right? Lots of dudes, they kept coming up on the same idea. This dude, Donald Keyhoe, he's from the Navy, right? This naval officer who literally turned like UFO researcher. In the 1950s, he became well known as a UFO researcher, arguing that the US government should conduct research on UFO matters. Because, to go back, in 1950s especially, it was freaking everyone out, because this is when they had Sputnik, right? The Russians launched Sputnik. So this whole thing's about, they thought it was some Russian satellite in the 50s, like some mysterious, creepy thing that were like, oh crap, the thing can cloak and stuff, but the truth was, it wasn't the Russians. And I know it's all conspiracy or whatever, but one of the most compelling things about this is that, where's my boy? Where's my boy Cooper? We'll find you, buddy. I got a lot pulled up here, so bear with me, guys. This is like pretty crazy. Gordon Cooper, basically the king of all astronauts, right? This guy was a champ. See him, Myra. Just going to get her a drink. This guy's a king of all astronauts, right? Literally the only astronaut in history who fell asleep during a takeoff, because he did it so many times they figured he'd catch some sleep while the thing blasts off. This guy's a champ. Okay, and he saw so much stuff from, like, I believe there was a fort called Edwards where he like trained, they saw UFOs there, and he admitted he was so loyal to the government and service that whatever they told him to say, he said it up until he retired. And then after he retired, he admitted everything. Like, he went back on, he's like, yeah, I just said that because I was a trooper, you know, like I was following fucking orders, man. And this guy basically, he saw UFOs and shit, and he saw the satellite, and as he was coming back to Earth at one point, he saw this satellite, right? This black satellite going at in a different direction, basically, than what was the technology was with Sputnik. Like you would go with this satellite was going against what was known at the time, like a different direction and propel and force and everything. And then he questioned it. He's like, why was it going the other way? And then, such as they do, NASA, government, whatever, they debunk it. They're like, no, Cooper was experiencing like some type of carbon monoxide hallucination, or like they declared it something. But this guy, and he just agreed. He's like, yeah, that's what it was then. I was hallucinating. But they couldn't explain. Where's that Sputnik picture? I got Batman just to keep this fresh. Where's my Sputnik? There we are. This is Sputnik 2, not 1. But Sputnik could only go one way. And then this satellite was going the other way, like against what was known. And they claim it was like a thruster malfunction or blah, 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 blah. And it didn't matter. This thing is apparently like 13 tons, like an oil truck in space. That's the other thing about it. It doesn't make sense. Like, we can't even blast this thing into orbit, right? According to some UFO conspiracists, the Black Knight is an artificial satellite of extraterrestrial origin that has orbited the Earth for approximately 13,000 years. The satellite story is most likely a conflation of several disconnected stories about various objects and their interpretations, all of them well documented independently, and none using the term Black Knight upon their first publication. Remember that. According to Senior Education Support Officer Martina Redpath of Armagh Planetarium in Northern Ireland, Black Knight is a jumble of completely unrelated stories. That's why it's so interesting, actually, because there's so many dudes over time, from our Tesla on first discovery of the transmission, to this guy picking it up again, to this guy picking it up again, and then the naval dude looking into he's literally in the 50s, like 1950, and they're like, we want to know what this is. And they debunk it because they were embarrassed. They couldn't even acknowledge what the fucking thing was, which is crazy. Lincoln Lopez looked into it, I think it was the 70s, like way later, and he really went down the fucking wormhole on this thing. They even printed articles in April 12th, 1960. I can't click on this because I'm not like a paid member or whatever. John Feeney posted in the New York Times, you can pick it up on the fucking street, extra, extra, read all about it. UFO orbiting Earth for 13,000 fucking years. But this guy wrote about it, saying that the U.S. government like picked up something and they basically threw this thing in the trash because they couldn't identify what the fuck it was, and it wasn't the Russians. Later on, Jack Valley, I don't know if I'm saying Valley, however you say his name, he's this French dude, right? This guy was not into UFO shit or aliens. He didn't give a fuck about that. He was like a pioneer, right? And then he looked into this thing. This is the dude from the set. He looked into this, and he's the one that got our pictures of this fucking thing. And then when he submitted these pictures, this one's really creepy actually. When he submitted these pictures, they trashed it because of what I was saying. Like, they just were like, we don't know what this is, so we're kind of embarrassed, so we're trashing this. Like, we're throwing it away. Like, it's not a thing, right? And the size of it, the weight mass, and I just think it's fucking, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny. This guy's from France, right? This is why I'm so interested. All these different dudes, they're from different parts of the world, or like different professions and studies and blah, blah, blah. But this dude was from France, and he was even, if there's one thing I'm sure of, is that we're not unified yet as like a world, as a species. And it's so interesting to me when like different nations agree on something, because we don't agree on anything. We're all like battling each other, and it's fucking divided and crazy. But they all these guys from different time periods, like decades would go by, and different professions, different nations, they would see this fucking thing, or like they would start talking about it, and it would just get to, there's a lot of pictures of it. I don't know which one to really choose. Look at this. 1973, they saw this thing forever, but apparently it's in this polar point where if you're in space, like even our guy Gordon, where you at, Gordon? This guy's cool. This fucking pioneer of fucking NASA. Gordon, he couldn't see it. He said it was either something really big far away or something closer that was smaller, but he couldn't even like really perceive it because at the time it's what's known as like polar orbit or some shit, where like if a country or nation wants to see the world like as on a grand scale of the Earth, they put satellites in polar orbit. But keep in mind, this was not too far back, but like it's back in the day, man, where when satellites, they were so afraid of the Russians setting up Sputnik, but this thing just intervened. They were even claiming there might be more than one. That's what this dude was. He was like a researcher out of like fucking New Mexico or some shit. He was from the Navy, but then they put him on UFO studies like for the country. And then he even claimed, he's like, yo, there's like 1 or 2 satellites that we cannot figure out. Oh no, Earthworm lost his head on this one. Jesus. Let's put you back in, Earthworm Jim. He's just a worm in a suit. Just like us. But yeah, he even claimed, yo, there's like 2 of these things. And they're trying to figure it out, man. And wave, again, going back to the wave thing, you can send out a transmission and then it could come back as a delay echo, as a repercussion. But for some reason, these delay echoes were coming back in different intervals, like every time. It wasn't like a consistency in the delay echo, which it should be from our own transmissions, which leads me very curious too. It's not the Russians, right? Gordon Cooper saw some shit. I put the Black Knight in here just to be fun. I don't know why Wonder Woman's here, but like, maybe Batman's involved with this satellite. I just did that to be fun. And then this dude, Duncan Lunan. He's my dude. He's Scottish. He's like some Scot that like figured some shit out about it. And that they couldn't deny, man. He found a star map. It lined up to this star constellation. Looks like booties. Boots. Bootez. Whatever you want to call it. Boots. Booties. But he believed it was a star map, right? He found like a written signature within this transmission of this satellite, which didn't make sense because it didn't line up within like what was known as the intervals of space or whatever you want to call it. It didn't line up. But then the more research he did, he realized it did line up because Earth rotates over time. Obviously, we're rotating right now. We're spinning, guys. We're spinning. And he realized that this thing has been around so long, like we're saying 13,000 years, just in polar orbit watching as a satellite, that it actually went back so far when the Earth's axis and star constellations lined up slightly different. And over time it changes, it morphs, you know, like space and time and all that shit. And I don't know, man. I'm just really interested in this topic. Because basically, what are we talking about here? We're talking about this fucking thing that it's almost like it's ours. Like we launched it up and we made sure whatever data it was collecting or what was on it, we couldn't receive until we obtained space travel. Possibly. Who the fuck knows? The origin of the Black Knight legend is often retrospectively dated back to the natural extraterrestrial repeating resources supposedly heard during the 1899 radio experiments of Nikola Tesla. A long-delayed echoes, first heard by amateur radio operator Jorgen Halls in Oslo, Norway in 1928. Brian Dunning of the Skeptoid podcast attributes Tesla's 1899 radio signals to pulsars, which were not identified in 1968. In 1954, UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe told newspapers that the United States Air Force had reported that 2 satellites orbiting Earth had been detected. At that time, no country had the technology to launch the satellite. You couldn't even do that with the amount of weight of it to like propel it out of our atmosphere. It's not a thing at that point. I don't even know if we could do it now. Skeptics have noted that Keyhoe had been promoting a UFO book at the time, and the news stories were likely written tongue-in-cheek and not intended to be taken seriously. Like most things, right? Until it fucking happens. A British rocket called the Black Knight rocket was used in conjunction with the Blue Streak missile program between 1958 and 1965 to test re-entry vehicles. A Black Knight satellite launcher project, announced in 1964, was considered a priority by the Ministry of Aviation. Yeah, they weren't fucking around. They wanted to know and figure it out, right? The program never put anything into orbit and is unrelated to the Black Knight satellite legend. In February 1960, Time reported that U.S. Navy had detected a dark object to be thought by a Soviet spy satellite like the Sputniks. They thought it was just, they're like, oh, it's the fucking Russians, right? They always blame the Russians. It's not the fucking Russians all the time. A follow-up article confirmed that the object was the remains of an Air Force Discoverer 8 satellite that had gone astray. In 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper, our boy, supposedly reported a UFO sighting during his 15th orbit in Mercury 9. This is the one, sorry, Earthworm. This is the one they were like, no, you're crazy, Gordon. You didn't see that. You were hallucinating. And he's like, okay, I was hallucinating. Give me my paycheck. That was confirmed by tracking stations, but there is no evidence that this happened. Neither NASA's mission's transcripts nor Cooper's personal copies show any such report being made during the orbit. In 1973, Scottish author Duncan Lunan analyzed the long-delayed radio echoes received by Hals and others speculated that they could possibly originate from a 13,000-year-old alien probe located in orbit around the Earth's moon. He suggested that the probe may have originated from a planet located in the solar system of the star Epsilon Bootis. That's what we're talking about, the booties thing. Lunan later retracted his conclusions, saying that he had made outright errors and his methods had been unscientific. Sounds like somebody got to these people, man. I see a pattern. You see it? The pattern is if something's real and true and it's like so fantastical that it breaks our belief systems, they just debunk it, or they're like, yeah, it's a bad thruster, you were hallucinating, you had a headache that day, remember? They just like write it off. Space debris photographed in 1998 during the STS-88 mission has widely claimed to be a Black Knight satellite. Space journalist James Oberg considers it probable that the photographs are of a thermal blanket that was confirmed a loss during an EVA by Jerry L. Ross and James H. Newman. There's not much else on this, guys. It kind of just like throws me to the wind. Propagation is what we're talking about. A transmission of motion, light, sound in a particular direction or through a medium. Very interesting. Pretty cool, right? Nikolai, you crazy man. He's the one that got the first one, man. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. What do you think of this thing? I don't doubt it, really. What's to say there's not a fucking alien satellite watching over us? At this point, I'm proud. And I'm thankful. Because, we can't take care of each other. Shit, we blow each other all the resources out of the water. We kill each other. I'm kind of glad that there's an alien race watching out for us at this point. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Ring a ding ding my bell, baby. And I'll see you guys in the next video.